Hey, it's Alex here. Before we get started, I wanted to tell you that this episode of the New Stack Makers is part of our second season of the Tech Founder Odyssey. We're so excited about this series that we're doing with tech founders. We're going to hear from more founders as they share how they've launched their venture, what they've learned from their successes, and how the pitfalls along the way have helped shape the way they run their company. I'm very interested in how they came up with this idea. What were the challenges? Those are the kind of things you're going to hear in these stories. So I'm hosting the first episode, and then we'll be handing it off to the awesome Heather Jocelyn and awesome as well, Calling Call for the rest of season 2. We've got some great guests lined up, so please stay tuned. You're watching the New Stack Makers, a podcast for people who develop, deploy, and manage at-scale software. For more information and articles about at-scale technologies, please visit thenewstack.io. Now enjoy the show.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Tech Founder Odyssey, part of the New Stack Makers podcast. I'm your host, Heather Jocelyn of TNS, and I'm here as per usual with my TNS colleague, Colleen Call. Hey, Colleen.
Hey, Heather. I'm so excited about this interview. There's somebody just like who's making a mark in the tech industry, so I'm pretty excited.
Me too. And we're talking today about Shanea Leven, founder and CEO of CodeSee. CodeSee, which she started in 2019, is a developer platform that helps developers and development teams better onboard, review, and understand code bases. Before starting her company, Shanea worked at a number of companies our listeners are well familiar with, Google, eBay, Docker, Cloudflare. We're excited to have her join us today. Hello and welcome, Shanea.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm also just as excited.
Cool. Let's get to it then. So let's start at the beginning. Where did you grow up and how did you get involved with computers?
So I grew up, I was born in Baltimore, Maryland.
And then,
nice.
That's where I am. That's where I am.
Amazing.
We're Heather. She's in Baltimore.
Yes.
Yeah.
a lot of my family is still there. We left, my mom and I left and my brother when I was 12. But then we moved to Virginia. When I was younger, I had a Windows 95, but it wasn't connected to the internet. And so so I ended up really trying to do everything on this computer, but then it actually did nothing because it didn't have the internet at the time. And I would end up playing tons and tons of Minesweeper. And then when we ended up moving to Virginia, I used to watch the Disney Channel when I was younger, and they always said, you could do everything, you can do all this really cool stuff. You can play games and you can do all this stuff online. And I could never do any of it until we moved. And my dad, my stepdad who adopted me, had internet. And then I got on the internet and there was this whole world of just stuff to do, things to see. You could be anybody else. And so once I was actually connected online at 12, I was hooked for life.
Awesome.
Nice, especially with the games, Minesweeper. Nice.
Yeah, exactly.
How
many hours did you clock in for that?
Oh, countless hours.
So were you, as a teenager, were you you're learning to program? What was that? How did you get started with that?
Yeah. So I actually started programming a lot later in life than the typical story. But I was always really involved with computers and doing things on the internet. And I didn't actually start programming until I went to college. I started in Visual Basic. And then I started making macros in Excel when I was an analyst. And then I started, and then I just expanded and expanded and expanded. And then when I was 19, I ended up starting a web development company, which I did not know anything about. But a partner of mine was in the publishing industry, and we had all of these authors looking to like come online and have their books to have an online presence. And so she had all of these authors who were trying to like do things on social media. Like in 2008, 2009, it was like, Facebook was, the new hotness, and everyone wanted a Facebook page, and she didn't know anything about Facebook at the time. And I did, just because I had grown up with it. And then all of a sudden, like, I was making custom websites for people. And then
Nice.
it just kind of kept going. I worked with a ton of authors, and I built websites for them. And then it was just a crazy ride after that. We had this agency. And so shortly after a few years of making custom websites for people, I ended up applying to work at Google on the agency program, because they needed someone with agency experience. And that kind of continued my journey.
Oh, wow. So you were, and when you were in college, you had undergraduate degrees in both computer science and business. Were you even thinking, it sounds like you had this business already when you were, how old
Mhm.
were you when you said you started again?
19.
Okay. So
Yeah.
you're like very young. So
Wow.
was
Very young.
starting your own business
Wow.
like part of the plan from the beginning?
No,
Or
actually. So I ended up, I did a lot of business stuff in high school. Actually, our classes, I actually wanted to do fashion design. I was really big into making my own clothes, and really big into, how it presented myself. And so I ended up, someone told me to like take a business class when I was in high school. So I did.
Mhm.
And so, and I ended up taking a marketing class, which is surprising because I'm terrible at marketing now. But anyway, I digress. So I ended up taking a lot of classes in business, and the program was really exciting because there's a lot of things that you can do, and a lot of math and a lot of logistics that I've also naturally gravitated towards. So I ended up, my undergrad started in accounting, and I was like terribly bored with that. So I ended up getting just a general business degree. And then I actually went back to school later to get a computer science degree.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. So now CodeSee, I mean, what's up with that? What prompted you? I mean, you sound already busy. I mean, as a 19-year-old. I mean, tell us about the experience and the problem that CodeSee wants to solve, and how that's going so far.
Yeah. So there was a lot of years between 19 and when I started CodeSee, just to be really, really clear.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Many years. But I ended up, I have always tried to learn more and more and more about technology. I had no concept of a developer tool until I went to Google. And I ended up like getting a job or I get two offers to be at Google. One was developer product, and one was search. And I was like, oh, well, search is too technical for me. I can never be on search, because I had watched the internship and I could never work on Google search. So I ended up taking the developer relations, developer product job. And I was hooked. Like, I saw the most brilliant people making such beautiful things. And I've always been a maker, right? Someone who like makes something, someone's very, very creative. And so I kept, at the time we had just released Android L, which and it had a developer program for the first time. And so it was just, iOS had a huge developer program since day one, and it was like 10 years behind. And so it was just such an amazing opportunity to build something for people who also built things. And I've been in developer product ever since, building tools for developers. And during that time, I ended up, filling my knowledge, my like foundational computer science knowledge, because I had been always programming self-taught. But I realized during that time that I had some gaps. So I went back to school to complete my computer science education. And then I ended up with working in developer tools, just moving that forward a lot. And I kept seeing the same problems over and over and over again, which was, these massive amounts of code. Like when you're working at somewhere like Google, which has 20 years at that point of just ridiculous legacy code, and trying to like get onboarded to it as a self-taught programmer, it was just massive. And so I kept seeing the same problem over and over, which was, how do you understand all of this code without reading it line by line? And so I never really can put it into those concepts until I saw this video by Bret Victor, Inventing on Principle. And a lot of people have actually started companies based on this one single talk, Inventing on Principle. Webflow was started that way. It was just so transformational to be able to, Bret Victor talked about visualizing, see the data, see comparisons, bringing creativity and bringing visualizations closer to the developer. And so, after that, I was just like, well, what if all code was, you can understand it visually? Because that's the fastest way to understand code, is not just reading it line by line and creating a visualization in your head, but having the computer create those visuals for you. And so lots of people had tried to do it before. I definitely, a lot of people had tried. But the ability to do that at a production level scale and have the user experience knowledge to be able to bring that to a usable product was really, really hard, and is really, really hard to do, to bring those two things together. And so in 2019, I started tinkering around with stuff. But only after, we got VC funding was we able to bring it to a production level scale.
But at the time, I mean, you're saying something that you didn't see it happening, and a lot of people were trying. So when you come up with this idea to start CodeSee,
Mhm.
did you see anybody trying to do the same thing that you were doing, or were you just this was a unique tool that you were offering to
I think it
customers?
was a very unique tool. And since then,
Nice.
other people have started, building tools in the same general space. But the real interesting part is we
Mhm.
all are taking different approaches to how we think about visualizing code. And they're not all like copycats of one another, because it's so new. And you're creating mental models that are, widely applicable. They all end up being different manifestations.
You mentioned that when you got VC funding, you were able to bring this to scale. So is that when you? How did I want to get a sense of your something that a thread that runs through a lot of our interviews for the series is when did you know it could be a company? When did you know it could be your full-time job?
So I didn't, at the time, I was already working, when you're working with a lot of developers, we're constantly building stuff, like literally constantly. And so
Mhm.
it's always kind of on your mind that something could be a business. I live in Silicon Valley, and, it's kind of the nature of everything constantly.
Mhm.
But I didn't actually intend to raise VC funds. That was not the plan. The plan was, my co-founder and I were going to build this thing. I was actually going to keep my full-time job. So I started building in 2019 in December, but I ended up taking a VP of product job at another developers tools company in January. And so I was building CodeSee on nights and weekends. And my co-founder was going to build the products while
Mhm.
I did the product management, while I kept my day job. And then, so it wasn't like, oh, this is the exact moment. And then I ended up, being very lucky and meeting some folks who we told the plan to, and they were like, yeah, we'll fund that. And so I kept my job for 2 more months before I quit. It wasn't I'm going to put every dollar that I have into this. I had part of my salary. We hired a contractor to kind of help with the growing of writing code in the beginning. And then after a couple months and I found my replacement, that's when I quit. Although I don't fully recommend that. I didn't realize, because I was already building CodeSee nights and weekends. I didn't realize that after you raise VC funding, they want to talk to you during business hours, like during the day, where you also have a job during the day. Those you can't be in two places at the same time. So I don't recommend that. But we didn't stop. We did stop exactly and put everything in it before we started.
That's fantastic. How many people work for CodeSee? Now, now that you told us about your journey.
13, and then we have a few contractors that kind of come in and out on the, depending on the specialist experiment that we're trying to run, that sort of thing.
Can you tell us a little bit? And you mentioned that you were lucky enough to meet some people who could connect you with VC funding. What was the experience of seeking funding like? Do you have any takeaways or advice for other potential founders from that?
Yeah, so I recommend. There is a book, Secrets of Sand Hill Road, and there are a lot of books around how to be a VC. And I recommend reading, if you don't have a network who is in the VC world, it is its own ecosystem. It has its own way of doing things. They have specific goals that they're trying to meet. They have something called LPs, or who are investors in VCs, and they all have different motivations and different goals. So as a founder, I highly recommend finding someone who knows about the VC industry, but also, or just learning how to be a VC so that you know what they look for. Because the logical thing, what I made my first mistake is I ended up taking the logical approach, right? Here's the business. We have a lot of users who are interested in this when we can build it. Here's what we're trying to accomplish. Here's why this would be a game-changing business. But here it's very logical. And a lot of times, particularly at the seed stage, anything could change at any time, as we've seen in the last year. And so learning about what they invest in, which is your vision and the team, are something that's completely opposite for what founders think that they're pitching. I have in my head the thing that I try to tell customers, but then could be slightly different framing for how you talk to investors. So I recommend either finding a buddy who knows about VC, or just reading a lot of content on how to be a VC.
I wanted to. You mentioned things that have happened in the last year. I think, Colleen, you had a question about AI.
I mean, you're talking about developer tools and your developer platform, but and the conversation that's going on since it went from Web3, but now it's generative AI and
for sure,
and ChatGPT. How has this, if it did, change the dynamic of how you work and for your customers?
For me, how I work, I think one of we might talk about this, but writing is really hard for me. And so it's a lot easier for me to edit than it is to start from a blank page. And so the most impact that I have in my personal life is using ChatGPT to just give me a quick summary on something. We had our first webinar, and I was I need to write a description for a webinar. Never done a webinar. So I was ChatGPT, give me a webinar description. And I was oh, that sounds like that sounds like it. Yeah, let's do that. And then I was able to edit it. But as far as developer coding, it's still got a long way to go. And that's fine, right? So I think that, you see a lot of things on Twitter right now, or you see a lot of things in the different communities where they have very small, it's toy app type things, which is great. It really helps doing very small, minute tasks that you have to be able to do, which is awesome. But as far as what people want for AI in regards to what we do, which is, a taking a code base and being able to have it tell you what to do, and being able to analyze the code and understand the code, like particularly on a company's code base. It's not readily available today, and there are no models for it. Everybody has their own unique plate of spaghetti, which is a saying that I say all the time. And so you have to be able to train models for that. Do I think that we'll get there one day? Sure. Yeah, maybe. But that doesn't negate the fact that there's still, like, how do you understand the code on a fundamental trade-off level, right? Like, how do you make those architecture decisions? And that's what humans are really, really good at. Like, what are the business trade-offs? What are the, how do you make something faster and more performance without not just small tweaks, but overall? And you might have different reasons. Humanity is going to come into play in all of that, right? How do you confirm that it's secure? How do you confirm that it's, ethical, right? All of those different things come into place with AIs. And I think we have a long, long way to go. Are we, CodeSee, thinking about, how AI affects our product? Of course we are. But I don't think that for what people are trying to do that it's there.
Well, speaking of when you mentioned we and humans,
Yes.
and because, I guess my question is, what is your company culture? Because, there, like you said, there's going to be a lot of ethics around this particular topic.
Mhm.
Plus, how is it? How do you make it comfortable to work with CodeSee, the people, and then finding that wonderful talent to work for a company like yours?
I've been around for a while. I've been around in tech companies for a while. And I say that to say I've seen a lot of different cultures. And so when we decided to start a company, in addition to, creating a good product and having a business that supports users, we wanted to make sure that our culture was just as important as the product itself. Building culture is it's just as important as like building the product in and of itself, the systems, the processes, the thought patterns, all of those things. And we absolutely try to protect our culture. And I have very key things that I think about with culture. For one thing, we think about culture as a system, not just like kind of fluffy, like pinball machines and those sorts of things. It's a system of behaviors and feedback, right? If there's a thing that you want to remain in your culture or grow in your culture, you reward those things. You can publicly reward those things. You can think about those things together. These are the things that you want to happen. If there are things that people are doing that don't fall in line with your culture, you have to say something. You have to give feedback. You have to move those things forward and articulate and demonstrate that those things are not what we want to facilitate in a company. And so they're sometimes very, very uncomfortable to be able to do. If you don't know how to do them well, I have another resource, Crucial Conversations. I highly recommend reading for building culture in a company. But we've all over the last few years have had to deal with a lot of uncomfortable situations. And so having an open place to have those conversations and a place where everyone feels safe is absolutely critical and will continue to be critical.
I wanted to ask a little bit about the role of community in your story. You're involved in an organization called Women in Product. What is it and how has it supported you?
Women in Product is an amazing organization started by, I don't know if they're OGs, but started by the amazing, they were at the time when they started VPs of product at Facebook, Deb Liu, Fiji, Deb Liu is now the CEO of Ancestry, and Fiji is the CEO of Instacart now. And so, they ended up starting this organization of women in product. And when I was very much, a technical PM for many years, and wanted to be a part of a community with, other women in product. Product is this very wish-wash, like, what's the word? Product is this very like wishy-washy field that like you can be, not everything is the same. Like it's not, you can't just toss a line of code and hit execute and it will tell you if it's broken. Like that's not the way that product works. And so being a part of community was incredibly important. And then when I became a director, I realized that, every woman in product that I know is part of this group. And so if you couldn't have executive level conversations, you couldn't have, team management. If you have a question about how to manage your team or a difficult person on your team, you couldn't have that in the main channel because your direct report might be there. And so we ended up starting a chapter called Executive Women in Product that I kind of led in for a while, and I've handed it off recently to a very, very dear friend of mine. But it was an absolute critical, place in my life. Like I ended up building a product course and then send it out to like a bunch of women in product that helped me before I raised funding. Like I sold this course to help get CodeSee off the ground. Like it was just an incredible place to meet people, ask those tough questions, make sure that people felt supported, and I could give back to that community when I was able to. So community is such an important part of not only my product career, but also my founding career as well.
You mentioned that you're not crazy about writing, but I noticed you do a lot of a very prolific blogger and podcaster. We know that generating content is essential to generating business leads. Do you like doing it, and what have you learned from doing all that?
To be perfectly honest, I don't like, like being part of this conversation is fine. Like, it's great. I love talking to people. I love supporting people, but writing is always been really, really hard for me. I'm not going to lie. It's very challenging for me to like sit down and like write something. I think over the years, I've gotten a lot better at it just by will of force, but it's not something that I naturally gravitate towards.
What's the real challenge of sitting down? I know, believe me, we're all writers and we're all editors, and I do prefer to edit, right?
Yeah.
Heather, we do prefer to edit.
Yeah.
But what's the challenge when it comes to that?
I don't like, it's just, I don't know if it's just the foundations of like putting together like an engaging piece. I think for like technical documentation or like writing a spec, like there's no feeling in that, right? There's no, like I'm fine doing that.
There's no feeling in writing.
Yeah. Like if you write a spec, like, or if you write like, instructions or a tutorial that way, like that's fine. Like do these things. I can be really clear. But when you're writing editorial content, there's all of these things that you have to, people have really, really short attention spans. I know I have really short attention spans. You have to make it funny and engaging, and you have to be brief, and you have to make sure not say too much, and think about like, people's, different perspectives and you never get to meet these people. You have no idea who's reading it. And so all of those things, make it really challenging for me, at least. So what I do is, I end up talking it out and just calling it word vomit. And then, trying to piece it together in like an organized way. And I've started making outlines, which is, is actually the opposite of word vomit. So trying to pull all of those together and then trying to maybe get some collaborative help with being like, hey, can you look at this real quick and give me some pointers, and making it a very collaborative approach, as opposed to doing it all myself.
But what about being a podcaster. I mean, it's just a lot of organizing but showing your face and your audio, sharing your audio, which is scary for me to hear myself. But I mean, do you prefer that other than blogging?
Absolutely. I absolutely prefer podcasting than writing, without a question. I can hop on a podcast and like with like a moment's notice and just kind of talk, because I just feel like with a lot of my training in developer product, going to events and kind of being one-on-one, I've been speaker trained, and which is not actually that much. It's basically like a therapy session. So if you've got a therapist like that, that also will help with speaker training. But I love doing podcasts. I can just hop on a call and talking with, like a friend.
Excellent. Excuse me. One last question. What's next for you and your company?
We're growing. We are really helping. There's like a massive amount of code that we're trying to analyze, and we've launched a new feature called Service Flows that allows you to visualize your architecture of the code base and showing how execution flows throughout all of your different services, and that has been. Like customers have loved that. And so what's next for us is to be able to really help people really get a full holistic picture of how their code works and how their systems work. And then might be adding some AI features in the near future. But really supporting our growing enterprises is where we're going to stick to for a while.
Excellent. Well,
that's nice.
And I guess we'll wrap up. Colleen and I would like to thank Shanea Leven of CodeSee for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
And we'd like to thank all of you for joining us for this episode of the Tech Founder Odyssey. This has been Heather Joslin and Colleen Call for the New Stack Makers. We'll see you next time.
If you like this video, please give us a thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more videos like this, you can always subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're on all the major social media platforms. You can always find us at thenewstack.io. We hope to see you soon.